Most people celebrate their birthday as a symbol of joy, growth, and identity. But some people treat it like any normal day. No excitement, no anticipation, no ritual, nothing special. And this behavior isn't random. It reveals something very distinct about how their mind works. To understand the psychology of people who don't celebrate their birthday, you have to go beneath the surface. Because the behavior looks simple, but the psychology behind it is layered, complex, and surprisingly revealing. The first thing to understand is this: a birthday isn't just a birthday. It is a symbolic checkpoint. It forces you to look at yourself. It forces you to acknowledge the passage of time, the progression of your identity, and the narrative of your life. And people who don't celebrate their birthday usually have a fundamentally different relationship with these three things. Start with identity. A birthday says, pay attention to yourself. Celebrate who you are. Recognize your significance. Some people don't feel comfortable with that. Not because they lack confidence, but because they do not anchor their identity in social rituals. These people function from what psychology calls an internal orientation. They don't need external markers to feel complete. They don't need special days to validate their existence. Their sense of self is stable without a spotlight. But there's another category. Some people avoid birthdays because attention makes them uncomfortable. Not because they are shy, but because attention creates self-awareness. And self-awareness triggers internal pressure. This is explained by objective self-awareness theory. When attention shifts onto you, you start comparing who you are with who you think you should be. For some people, that comparison creates discomfort, so they avoid the entire ritual. But identity alone doesn't explain everything. The deeper psychological driver is time. Most people celebrate birthdays to feel progress. People who avoid birthdays see time differently. They don't see life as a series of yearly milestones. They see it as a continuous flow without checkpoints. The idea of another year past doesn't excite them. It confronts them. And confrontation with time leads directly into the next layer: existential awareness. Here's where philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Martin Heidegger give insight. Sartre argued that humans spend most of their life avoiding the truth of their own freedom and mortality. Birthdays highlight that truth. You're aging, you're changing, you're moving forward whether you want to or not. Heidegger said that people avoid anything that reminds them of the finite nature of existence. Birthdays are exactly that kind of reminder. For some individuals, celebrating a birthday feels like being forced to acknowledge existential reality, and they prefer not to. But not celebrating doesn't always mean avoidance. For another group, the reason is philosophical minimalism. Think of the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. They argued that joy should not depend on external rituals or dates. True fulfillment comes from internal stability, not from social celebrations. A person who doesn't celebrate their birthday might have internalized this view unconsciously. To them, happiness is independent of special occasions. They don't wait for symbolic days to feel good. They create meaning from everyday life. This is why many highly independent, self-guided individuals skip birthdays. Their internal value system simply doesn't prioritize artificial milestones. But now let's go deeper. Another psychological layer is emotional independence. A birthday is a day when people expect validation, wishes, gifts, attention, affection. But someone who has trained themselves to not rely on others emotionally does not crave these things. So they don't create a ritual that depends on external participation. This idea aligns with attachment theory. People with avoidant or highly self-sufficient attachment styles don't seek social reassurance. They prefer emotional neutrality. A birthday disrupts that neutrality, so they prefer to ignore it. But emotional independence is not the only factor. Sometimes the reason comes from childhood. For some, childhood birthdays were disappointing, forgotten, ignored, or overshadowed by conflict. When childhood experiences create a pattern of emotional letdown, the adult mind learns to not expect anything. To avoid disappointment, they avoid celebration entirely. This is a psychological defense mechanism called protective withdrawal. If you don't expect joy, you can't be hurt when it doesn't arrive. Skipping the birthday becomes a way to control emotional vulnerability. But what about the people who simply say, "I don't care about birthdays"? Their psychology is different. They're not avoiding, they're not defensive, they're not anxious. They're simply non-attached. This aligns with Buddhist psychology, where attachment to events, dates, status, or recognition is seen as unnecessary. These individuals don't assign symbolic meaning to birthdays. They see all days as equal. They feel no internal compulsion to elevate one day above the rest. To them, celebrating a birthday feels artificial, so they don't participate. Another major factor is achievement conflict. A birthday evaluates progress. It forces the question, what have I done in the last year? People who feel they didn't grow enough may avoid this checkpoint. This avoidance isn't laziness, it's cognitive dissonance. The gap between who they are and who they want to be feels uncomfortable. So they shut down the reminder. But interestingly, the opposite is also true. High achievers sometimes don't celebrate birthdays because they don't want to pause. They don't want to be distracted. They live in a state of constant forward motion. Celebration feels like interruption. But now we move into another psychological layer, social structure. Many people who don't celebrate a birthday aren't antisocial. They just don't view social ritual as meaningful. To them, shared experiences matter more than symbolic ones. They'd rather have a deep conversation on a random Tuesday than a planned celebration on a birthday. This perspective aligns with existential humanism, the belief that authenticity is more important than social tradition. Then comes cognitive style. Some people have a highly analytical mind. They see birthdays as arbitrary. Why celebrate the day the Earth completes another orbit? It's a random cosmic event with no inherent meaning. This rational skepticism creates emotional distance from rituals. But emotional distance is only half the story. Another factor is emotional processing speed. Some individuals take time to feel emotions. Events don't trigger immediate excitement or celebration inside them. A birthday simply doesn't create an emotional spike. It feels like any other day because their emotional system functions steadily. Another angle comes from cultural and familial patterns. For some people, birthdays were never big in their family, so they internalize the idea that birthdays are normal days. Culture silently shapes the emotional meaning of the ritual. But one of the most overlooked reasons people avoid birthdays is the fear of vulnerability. A birthday opens the door to emotional exposure. People watch you. They expect reactions. They expect joy. They expect gratitude. They expect warmth. For individuals who are emotionally private or detached, this feels exhausting. So avoiding the birthday ritual protects their emotional boundaries. Now, let's connect all these strands. People who do not celebrate their birthday often share several underlying traits. They are internally oriented. They do not depend on external validation. They do not assign meaning to arbitrary rituals. They dislike being the center of attention. They are uncomfortable with forced social expectations.
They are emotionally independent. They may be existentially aware. They may avoid reminders of time, age, or mortality. They may protect themselves from disappointment. They may prefer authenticity over tradition. They may function from a minimalist or philosophical mindset. And here's the surprising part. In many cases, not celebrating a birthday is not a sign of emotional absence. It's a sign of emotional maturity. It means a person understands that meaning is internal, not external. That identity isn't defined once a year. That happiness doesn't depend on ritual. That attention isn't necessary for self-worth. But it can also be a sign of unresolved emotional pain, childhood disappointment, fear of vulnerability, or discomfort with the passing of time. The behavior itself doesn't explain everything, but the reason behind it always reveals something important about how that individual relates to the world. Ultimately, people who do not celebrate their birthday share one core psychological trait. They don't need the day to define them. Their identity, worth, joy, and meaning come from within, not from a date on the calendar. And that, in itself, tells you more about them than the celebration could ever.